And what's up? Welcome in GC Live Monday episode of the show. You see him right there. He is Chris Clark. I am Wes Mitchell. Plenty to get to today. Of course, South Carolina football, week 2 of spring football practice, football recruiting, plenty going on there. Chris, multiple prospects on campus really throughout the week, but then culminating with a big Saturday for South Carolina. Obviously, men's basketball, that discussion still on the tip of everyone's tongues out there, trying to see what direction South Carolina is going to go with this thing. Women's basketball makes Sweet 16 for the 8th straight year, other than, of course, the season that the tournament did not exist. Baseball swept by Tennessee. I doubt we'll have time or the desire from many of you to hear us talk about that. So, Chris, plenty going down right now in Gamecock Nation for us to try to make sense of it all.
Yeah, like you said, man, tons of prospects on campus for the Gamecock football staff over the weekend, and returns that have been rolling out on GamecockCentral.com. We're continuing. I know you and I are continuing to work on getting some prospect returns. Just kind of a general sense there that we get, more positives for the Gamecocks. A lot of 2023, 2024 guys that were on campus, some in-state priority targets, a lot of out-of-state guys from Georgia, North Carolina, surrounding areas, some guys from Virginia even, and a lot of positive returns there. From what I've picked up from both some prospects and some sources that are kind of familiar with how the weekend went, Wes, is that, they were impressed with practice, the intensity, even hearing some stuff about how some prospects have been to some other schools that compete with South Carolina for recruits, and that a lot of the feedback was that they were impressed with the Gamecocks in terms of their intensity and how their coaching staff is relative to some others. So if you're a Gamecock fan, that's something that's always good to hear. Obviously, you touched on women's basketball in that situation, and the coaching search for basketball continues to roll on. It's certainly been interesting. It's been a roller coaster in some ways, and continuing to work on that and try to report on that situation as we get information.
Yeah, you can go check out our Sunday report if you have not already on GamecockCentral.com. Nothing new on our end for that as far as Monday is concerned, but of course, continuing to work to see what might be next on that front. Before we go any further, got to tell you about our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. You see him right above my head every single show. He is the presenting sponsor. ClintHammond.com is how you can find out more information on Clint, 803-771-6933. And of course, the NMLS number is 71597. If you just want to email Clint, you can do that at chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. Appreciate Clint, as always, being our sponsor here on the show, longtime sponsor here on GC Live. If you're in the market for a new home, Clint will help you get through that process. It can be a daunting process. He will make it easy. Chris, also, we failed to mention, and obviously this probably leads the show if it was public yet, but a welcome home coming in for South Carolina on Saturday. It's been interesting. Now, 2 silent welcome homes out there for South Carolina that have yet to be revealed. So it's I don't know how you count it. I guess the first, in my opinion, you don't get to count as the first 2023 commit for South Carolina until you go public. So that remains a discussion, right? It could be one of these 2 guys. It could be somebody completely different who jumps to the line, commits, and then goes public with it. So we shall see. From what we have gathered, no set date at this time on this prospect to go public. But a guy that I think fans will, once they read more about him, I think they'll actually be very, very happy with this pickup once he does go public.
For sure. And you remember, what's the record, Wes, for most silent commitments that were not revealed at once? Wasn't there a point where there were like 6 or 7 last year? And you remember it was like, all right, this guy went public. He was the 3rd one. The 7th one went first, and it was so crazy. There was a stretch where they got really hot in terms of picking up commitments. I don't think they'll stack up that many silent commitments, but I could be wrong. I didn't anticipate that last year. So, yeah, 2 in the books. I guess we're safe to say, Wes, both from the 23 class. I mean, we knew that on the first one. So a couple of 2023 commitments And yeah, we're safe to say that because you already said it. So who will be the first public one? We don't know that yet. I didn't anticipate the first two also being silent. So, sometimes guys throw their name in there privately and then publicly. They're going to kind of keep going through the process and enjoying things and taking visits and communicating with coaches, once in a lifetime thing. So, I think, Wes, both of those guys, Carolina probably have a pretty good shot to hang on to both. But we'll see how it goes. And whenever they decide to reveal it, we don't have a great sense of that. Craig Godwin mentioned the Sumter kid, probably talking about Montague Rames. He has already said publicly that he's not committed anywhere. So I think we're safe to strike him out. Not him.
Chop him off.
We'll chop him off. You can guess on any of the other 5 million prospects out there.
Craig says for me to wink twice if he's right. Let me sit here and make sure I don't wink.
The rest of the show.
By the way, at some point I am going to release the many faces of GC Live, because the YouTube algorithm and the StreamYard algorithm, when it's doing like it tries to grab a picture for like the thumbnail. Luckily for GC Live, we use a graphic as the YouTube thumbnail, but you can see behind the scenes what it has grabbed. There are some gems, man. At some point, we all need to laugh. That might be today, actually. We are going to release the many faces of the GC Live cam for the enjoyment of all. Probably not the enjoyment of me, Chris, or Kendall. There is a gem of one of Kendall on there that I believe she will kill me if I literally kill me if I put out there. But yeah, I think, Chris, they're off to a good start on this class, even if it's not necessarily, if you're just a casual viewer of recruiting and you checked out the commitment list, but there's nobody committed for 2023. I think they're off to a good start though behind the scenes, just as far as putting themselves in a position, getting these guys on campus. I reported yesterday that Benjamin Hall, running back from North Cobb, has actually set his official visit to South Carolina for June 10th. I think they're in a really good place with him. I think he's a guy that still I know that he does not have a ranking by his name yet on On3, but I think you're going to continue to see his stock continue to go up. Still some other guys we're trying to touch base with from this weekend or from even this past week. But I talked to Josiah Thompson, another great visit for him, 2024 O-line. I think they're in really good shape with him. You talked to the Kilgore kid briefly.
Yeah,
he's an intriguing prospect.
He is. Jalon Kilgore, who's from the state of Georgia, 2023 guy, who's a bigger, safety type. Lots of DBs on campus, Wes. They're Torian Gray brought in a really good DB class last year, getting in early on some 23 and 24 guys. So Kilgore was one, and South Carolina certainly very in the mix there. His first SEC offer in January. So this was his second visit to campus this year. He was on campus for a junior day back in January. He was on hand this past weekend, and he's already planning on returning for the spring game. So it'll be 3 visits before the summer even gets here. Figures, Wes, that maybe he takes, maybe he's one of those summer official visit guys, or maybe he takes it during the season or after. But, you hear that thing in recruiting about following the visits, and certainly with someone like Jalon Kilgore, and there are a few guys in this category, right? Even guys from the 24 class like Thompson that you mentioned. You get these guys on campus a lot. You follow the visits. That shows you that South Carolina's got a pretty good shot. And there are a lot of guys in that category. The 23 class, I think, is one that this staff has really been building towards. Like you think about when Beamer came in December 2020, you're trying to kind of salvage the 21 class, and you're doing it during COVID. There's no in-person visits. You're putting it together very quickly. You're taking transfers to even the 22 class, his first real class. You didn't have a 3-year, 2-year runway, to recruit and build relationships with these guys. So the 23 class is really the one that they've had the longest path to try to build these relationships. And I think the quality of the classes, you would think, could continue to rise under Shane Beamer. And look, they have to go finish, right? And they're going to need a good year on the field to help. But there are some early, encouraging signs.
Yeah, man, and I think also important to remember this is the time of year when the rankings have really the rankings can all you're always going to have some guys that can move up or move down, but this time of year the rankings really have not settled at all yet. Like the longer you get, the less movement there's going to be within the rankings. And again, I'll go back to Benjamin Hall, man. They love this kid. Like I think he is a priority guy at running back. You pull up his profile, no stars by his name, at least in on three yet. But you look internally, I dare say he's one of, if not, the top guy on their board at the running back position. He's way up there. So I think you look and you got to remember. I mean, this is just an example, probably a bad example because it brings back bad memories. But I distinctly remember like way back when South Carolina jumps on Hamza Nasruddin for the first time and makes a move on him during junior day season, if I remember correctly. And it's like South Carolina has a great shot with this guy. At the time, not really even a known guy at all. And then you fast forward and we're talking about him still to this day as one of the biggest misses of the Muschamp era. So, again, maybe a bad example, but that's just the first one that hit my mind. Like I look at the Kilgore kid, someone South Carolina got in on early, someone that has seen his stock continue to rise as far as offers go. I look at Benjamin Hall. I look at Reed McKeska, a tight end out of Texas, who's originally from Raleigh. South Carolina got in on him pretty early, and then you see him. His recruitment just continued to blow up. So this time of year, yes, there are the guys that are already. You look at Jaden Bradford, who was on campus this past week. He's only a 2024, and he's already a known 4-star, highly recruited, highly rated guy. But you're going to have a number of prospects on your campus right now where it is highly important, even if they haven't blown up yet, Chris, to get them into your system, essentially, to where you're sending them the edits, you're getting them on your campus, you're having some discussions with them to where you don't fall behind.
Yeah, it is very important. I mean, I think you can think back to some of the guys that have been on campus just so consistently over the years. But there's almost like some college coaches, even that I've talked to, think there can be a point of diminishing returns, like where you get a guy on campus so much, like it can almost work against you. But look, in general, you want to get a guy on campus early. It can't be, you know, the fall of his senior year and you get a guy on campus for a game the first time. It's going to be tough. You want guys on your campus for a game, but you want that to be kind of a cherry on top, or you want that to be a stage in the progression. Ideally, you want a guy on campus his junior, his sophomore year for some kind of social event, some kind of junior day. You want him there for the spring game. You want him there in the summer, maybe work out at camp with your coaches. You want an official visit. South Carolina is one of the schools that I think has leveraged, even under Muschamp staff, Beamer staff, getting guys on campus for the summer official visits has proven to be a pretty good time for them. Then you can get them back on campus for a game where, look, the coaches are dialed in during game week. They can still spend some time with the players, but you've laid that foundation of getting them comfortable to where, like you said, man, in the system, that's a good way to categorize it. Guys that you can get to that point where they've already done their official during the summer, maybe they're coming back for a game. When guys feel like they're already part of the program, that's what you want. And there's some guys, you can think of some guys in the 24 class, even Wes, that seem really kind of part of the program almost, even though they're not committed. Maybe they don't even commit to South Carolina, but they're at all the events. They've been on campus numerous times. And I think that's what you want as far as laying that foundation.
Yeah, I think I almost said you kind of want to hit the trifecta as far as the different types of visits, but really I think it's probably even more than that. You want the early game day visit, maybe when they're an underclassman and they're not even really recruited that hard yet. Then you want the junior day, right? That sort of is a certain type of visit. Then you want, I would say, at least one of either a camp, or if you're really lucky, you want one of those like laid back visit days, like the cookouts they do, right? And then ideally, you obviously want to finish it off with the official visit. And I do think, man, for, like you said, for some of these really highly regarded guys, especially if they don't love recruiting, there is at some point. I mean, I want to say it Rick Sandage that was one of those guys that just, I mean,
Oh yeah,
he visited 1,000 times,
agreed.
and I I say there's probably a certain point when, if the guy is not committed, I believe is probably the caveat to it. Like if a guy visits 20 times, but he committed after, Luke Doty probably visited 20 times in his recruiting career. But once you're committed, it's not really the same. You're just going to hang out with the guys, you're going to keep getting more comfortable with the coaches, you're recruiting other people to join you. But if you're uncommitted, it kind of gets to, it almost reminds me, it's like almost like an awkward silence. It's like, what else do we have to say? Like if you're the program, you weren't holding back on visit number 4. So what are you going to say at visit number 10? Like what is left? What is left to put forward? And I remember pretty distinctly when Sanders was taking his official visit, it was just like, well, in this case, this is somebody speaking for South Carolina, we've showed them everything we have to show them, and they were still hanging on for dear life to the very end, battling with Georgia, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, has it become stale? Not that your product is inferior, you just had it so much. And Georgia came along. We remember the push they made for Sandage, and they were kind of a hot team. They were kind of the shiny thing, where South Carolina had been very consistent. He'd been there more. He'd been there a ton. Loved the staff, etc. But there could be that point where I've seen this so much, this thing's more new, I'm going to go with that. And it was pretty close. And there were a lot of people concerned about that. That's what we mean by that kind of point of diminishing returns. So it is an interesting balance. But what you do know, I think in general, Wes, you'd rather have a guy on campus too many quote unquote times than not at all. And so when you look at building out these classes, 21 obviously for Carolina, for Shane Beamer, that was a little bit of a crapshoot with how you got to put it together. You're scrambling for guys, you're getting guys on virtual visits, you're getting transfers, and you're kind of assessing what was already in the class when you took over the job from Will Muschamp. 22, they opened recruiting back up, but you're working from behind, and now you've got that runway on 2023 and 2024 kids, to where now you actually have some time to build those relationships, get them on campus early, and get them in your system.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Chris, it'll be another pretty decently sized recruiting week this week. They're going to have some guys in on Saturday again, from what I've been told. And then, of course, you sort of fast forward a little bit, spring game. I think having a night spring game, you'll have to – I haven't looked at the schedule as far as who all else is having their spring game. That's always kind of an interesting little early indicator. Which spring game do you choose, if you're a big-time prospect? Sometimes it's based on, well, I already went to that school last week, let me go to this different school this week. But sometimes when it's all even, that is an early indicator of where someone's head and or heart lies early on in the recruiting process. What's up to Tyler, checking in from Gaffney? Hope you're well, man. Hope you're doing good. Corey Rucker, Chris, official visit. Assuming that he made it in, and he is scheduled to be on campus right now for an official visit. This is the wide receiver from Arkansas State, transfer, not graduate transfer, but transfer portal wide receiver from Arkansas State. Has some years of eligibility left, and I really think as someone fans could get excited about if South Carolina can pull this off, because I think he's another instant impact. We've already heard Antoine Wells being a little bit of the talk of camp, but this kid would add in another just really nice weapon for Spencer Rattler and company on the offense.
Yeah, it would. And I think we talked about this on our show, I think last week, one of the shows last week, West, and that look, the offense is still very much improvement mode. Be clear about that. But you do go into the year with maybe a few more proven commodities than last season, and maybe a few more even bodies at a spot like wide receiver. So you have Spencer Rattler, a quarterback, number one. He hasn't taken a snap at South Carolina, right? But he has proven at the college level he can play at a high level. You would anticipate there's at least some carryover there. Josh Van had a breakout year last season, so we know that he is a more established guy coming in, and they have some guys behind him, or alongside him, and Antoine Wells, who's done a very good job during camp, and Amari and Brown finished the year in the bowl game very well, and he's a guy that you were able to see a glimpse of. Okay, this is what he can do. There's several guys on the roster that are in that category where maybe they could take a step forward, but the staff intentionally left room to be able to take another difference maker for the transfer portal. And the number one spot you still looked at, despite what I just said, is wide receiver, because there is still it's still kind of open season there for a guy to come and take a slot, maybe even start, definitely play some in that rotation. Rucker's a guy who's done it at Arkansas State. He's got some size, some speed, good ball skills, and I think would be a very quality addition. Carolina, as you've documented, Wes, has done a pretty good job there, it seems like, in the early going, and there's certainly a need that they can sell to him.
Yeah, and the big thing there, much like with Devontae Reed, also to an extent with Antoine Wells, even with the portal kids, man, just getting in first, even if we're talking about a matter of hours involved, it does matter. It's kind of interesting how much it matters. Devontae Reed told us on one of the Garnet Trust interviews, he was like, Coach White he reached out first and he got me on campus first. And Reed really, it was kind of like he just didn't want to have to deal with a bunch of, there was a time crunch. He didn't want to have to deal with a bunch of visits, and he was just like, I'm going to visit, and if it checks out, that's where I'm going. So, with Rucker, he has reportedly taken some other trips, so that's not exactly the same at all, here, but it does matter to get in first. I think there is some type of prior connection there with Rucker and somebody on the staff as well. I've heard that. So, just a prior relationship type deal. So that always helps you a little bit as well. And I think that's why South Carolina was able to, A, get in so quick, and B, that they feel pretty decent. I mean, I think Ole Miss is going to be a factor here. He's from Mississippi. They have a lot to sell offensively. But the Rattler factor cannot be overlooked here. I think that's going to be big. And, man, Chris, I just continue to hear, and we're about to be a broken record. I want to sort of shift this to a little bit more football team talk. I just continue to hear from people that haven't seen Rattler up close and in person when they see him for the first time, and they're just like, that kid can just sling the football. Like it's pop. Like the ball just pops out of his hand. That was my, I would say, impression as well. But just hearing from some coaches who are getting over there for practice and stuff as well, and watching full practices, which we have not been able to do. It's pretty interesting how so many of them, Chris, have like the same reaction to seeing Rattler for the first time.
Yeah, and I think there are certain guys who just, even if you haven't seen them play in a game, or even just take the game away from it, just watching them in their element in practice, doing pass skeleton or one-on-ones or whatever it may be, that you're just like, that guy's different. One I remember, Alshon Jeffrey. When you watched Alshon Jeffrey in practice back in the day, we'd sit out there for the entire practice.
Hours.
For hours. People tailgating behind the bushes, all that stuff. And you would just see Alshon do some stuff like run a slant over the middle and just catch the ball one-handed, just reaching out and plucking it. There are quarterbacks that you can watch like in a camp setting or just watch practice where you're like, that guy's a little different when he throws the football. And Spencer Rattler definitely fits in that category. So, I mean, even we, Wes, when we were sitting at practice last week, I mean, we knew Rattler could play. We've seen his high school stuff, camp stuff. We've seen him at Oklahoma. But when you see it in person and you compare it to some others, you're like, yeah, I mean, that guy can really throw the football. So everything we've heard, just to echo you on my end, impressive in terms of his approach and impressive with his physical talent level.
Yeah, Chris, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on the overall like expectations for the team. Usually, not usually, but like right now, you are talking about the team versus itself, right? Like you're not playing anyone else. There's not even a shared practice like they do in the NFL sometimes. Your O line is facing your D line. And right now it hasn't even, especially when we've been out there, it hasn't even been in pads yet. You're not knocking guys around. So is it dangerous sometimes to really talk expectations for how good a team is going to be this time of year? Unless it's just a team where you return so many guys. And if you look at some of those charts, some of the analytics, South Carolina's returning production from last year is actually one of the lowest in the country. So, there's a lot of production to replace before you even want to start thinking about increased production. Let's keep that in mind. That said, and a big part of that, I believe, is probably because of the running backs being gone. Z White gone, obviously. Kevin Harris gone, obviously. So keeping that in mind, I've had a coach who I very much trust basically say, look, it just looks sharper. And you heard one of the guys today in the player media availability was talking about how there just have been far less mental issues, like mental errors, for it to be still pretty early in the spring. That's at least a pretty positive early sign for me, Chris, when you consider how many issues there were early in the season last year that just appeared from the outside looking in to be pretty clearly mental issues, where either there's just the comfort level wasn't quite there. The number of penalties I thought were a lot of times more mental mistakes as opposed to physical mistakes early on. They cut down on the penalties tremendously as the year went on last year. Credit them for that. But it just feels like the word I'm getting is that the guys are just a little more comfortable, a little more tuned in, a little more sharp than they were at any point preseason last year.
Yeah, and how many times last year, especially early, like you said, how many times did we use that word communication issues, that phrase communication issues? It was a ton. And there was some frustration. Sometimes you saw it on the television broadcast for those of you that watched with Shane Beamer, whether it's getting into plays or some kind of mental mistakes. Certainly, everybody was sitting around the first several games of the season because the running game was expected to be the one consistent thing last season, yet it wasn't. And so it was a scramble by everybody, us included, to figure out, well, what is going on? And a lot of what you saw and a lot of what you heard was communication issues. And so certainly cleaning those things up, not only just penalties, Wes, like things that are visible like that, but just playing your assignment, getting the calls in, getting the call from the sideline, communicating it correctly, executing it correctly. Those are things that have to get a lot better, because if some of those things were better last season, we probably would have seen more offensive production. I think that's a great point too about just the production chart and what this team returns. I mean, you think about some of the guys, and some of them are legitimate holes, right? You think of Jalen Foster, for instance. You lose JJ Nagara, you lose Aaron Sterling, you lose Jabari Ellis. Damani Staley, was very productive last year. Then offensively, the running backs, but then there's some other areas. Parker White. I mean, heck, he's a really big one. But you look at quarterback, you start 4 different quarterbacks. The expectation is that your starter is Spencer Rattler, and the expectation is it's probably going to be pretty good for you, right? So that's one that may get better. So I think there is a balance between some areas that can be as good or maybe even better in replacing the production. There's also some areas that are a concern that they're really going to have to figure out, before the season rolls around.
Certainly, man. Before we get any farther in the show, I want to tell everybody about our newest sponsor. It is the tax team at the Liberty Tax locations right here in Columbia, Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia. Let's see, 1123 South Lake Drive in Lexington, 6467 St. Andrews Road in Irmo. That's by the Kroger. And then 551 St. Andrews Road, Columbia, 29210. That's by the Harbor Freight near KJ's Grocer, locally owned and operated. They have virtual income tax prep with local tax professionals or in person in their office. So you can do that remotely if you prefer. And right now, Chris, they are open evenings and weekends just to make sure that you can get your taxes done between now and April 15th. Have we done our taxes yet, Chris? We still
Nope.
still waiting? You got the taxiety?
I definitely got the taxiety going on.
Same, man. But they're going to take care of that for you. The Liberty Tax Team right here in the Columbia area. Find them at 803-462-5576. Again, that's 803-462-5576. Tell them that the Gamecock Central boys sent you, and they will definitely take care of you. Let's start to close this thing out, man. We'll have, I believe, do we have a viewing period tomorrow for practice? Is that right? Do you know off the top of your head? I'm going to put Chris right on the spot. I've not looked at it.
But actually, I was actually prepared. Or let me correct myself. I thought I was prepared for this. I thought we did not have a viewing window tomorrow.
Okay. All right. There is a practice tomorrow morning.
There is a practice. You're correct.
Practice Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday this week. I was hoping we had a viewing period. Maybe we do not. We'll figure that out. But offensive players spoke today. You can go get more on that from Colin Taylor. He posted the highlights from what everybody had to say. Rattler just seems to be settling in was my biggest impression. He said, I thought it was interesting, Chris. They were talking about the offense and the scheme and what they're doing here compared to their continued talk. I think this is going to be a trend for some reason. People have locked on to like the fact they didn't huddle really at all at Oklahoma, figuring out exactly. It sounds like it's an afterthought if you're a fan, but a lot of these college offenses, they don't huddle, and there is a sequence to huddling. Rattler talking about, he had a great quote that, nobody likes a sloppy huddle, which basically means you have to break the huddle with some conviction about you. And if you don't clap all at the same time in sequence, then apparently Marcus Satterfield gets very upset. And so that's been a part of this process for him. The under center stuff, I've heard he actually looks pretty natural just doing the play action stuff and the footwork of that. But it is a process. But Rattler also said that they have been very open to allowing him to bring the concepts that he likes and is most comfortable with from Oklahoma to South Carolina as well, which as long as you don't bloat this playbook too much, which I think was an issue at times to start last year, I do think that's a good thing because I know he wants to do the pro style stuff and he wants that to be a big part of this. That was a part of the reason he came to South Carolina. But I do think leaning on some concepts he's really comfortable with is obviously a pretty good idea too.
Sure, and you want to be able to accentuate your strengths, and Rattler has some of those. He's shown on film, and he's got some areas he wants to get better at. One was preparing for the next level, like you said, by transitioning to an offense that has more pro style elements to it, that has some NFL stuff thrown in it. The huddle, obviously, the way that you're calling the plays, some of the reads that you're making at quarterback will fit that bill and do that for you. We observed Rattler in practice last week, Wes, just doing a very simple drill where basically you're just taking a snap under center and handing the ball off to a guy. But these are things that if you're used to standing in shotgun and literally just handing a ball right to a guy beside you or behind you if you're in the pistol, obviously that's a different feel. So Rattler said it took, a day to get adjusted to, and he'll keep working on it. But that did stand out to me. And I think aside from just calling things that you're comfortable with, one of the things that Rattler talked about was just the freedom to improvise. He said that Marcus Satterfield has, allowed him to do that, has freed him up to play free. And I think that's something else that he was kind of looking for too in his next stop. And I remember the very first interview that we did with Spencer, the Garnet Trust interview with 360 Clean sponsoring it, West, is that Rattler mentioned that he wanted to use his legs a little bit more this season, that he wanted to run a little bit more and kind of free that up, open that up. So when you think about that and you think about the improvisation that he spoke about earlier today, that's kind of got my wheels turning a little bit. It's kind of interesting, and certainly he's a guy that can move around and does have ample athleticism.
I think Rattler even was saying, Chris, that that was part of his approach, and I would say a priority with the weight room and the training stuff he was doing was trying to get a little bit quicker, get a little bit stronger in the lower body, and kind of build off of what I mean. He's a great passer off platform, like we already know that. But I think adding a little bit more speed in there seems to have been a priority for him. I I'll admit, man, I was a little bit not shocked. I was a little bit surprised that that was a part of what has stood out to Rattler so far, because I do feel like this is an offense that does have some structure to it. Like, this is an offense that's not. We see some college offenses that are essentially one or two reads and then you just go make a play. This is a highly NFL styled offense where there appears to be multiple reads within a play, but you can't. I actually read a really good article a while back from PFF, and they were talking about how Oklahoma was basically trying to be too structured in what they tried to do with Rattler this past season, and it was taking away some of just that naturally born ability to. It breaks down. I'm going to get out of the pocket, not necessarily take off running. He can, but his real weapon is the quick release while on the run and being able to get the football down the field and stretch the field. So I kind of thought, Chris, that was a positive sign to me, because I think the last thing you want to do if you're South Carolina is take this kid's natural ability and try to put him in a box. Like, you've got to let him go be himself. And Rattler, I believe that was the exact quote. He said that, or be you, I think was the exact quote. He said, Satterfield said, you got to just go be you. I think if you're a Gamecock fan, you should be excited to hear that. It's not, oh, you have to play within the structure of this offense. You have to do exactly what this offense says you have to do. And if you deviate from the plan at all, then you're wrong, and we're going to pull you from the game, you know?
Well, think about how Connor Shaw played, right? I mean, Steve Spurrier's offense, I think we can all agree, is more simple than what South Carolina's running now. But I mean, if Connor Shaw was put in that box, he still could have been very effective. Would he have been as effective? I don't think so, because he was really good at running, at improvising, at making plays. I mean, you think about and this guy's totally different type of player than Spencer Rattler, but super talented as well. I mean, think about Johnny Manziel at A&M. What if you caged him up? No, don't do that. I mean, we wouldn't have seen some of the best plays in college football history if that were the case. So with Rattler, even at Oklahoma, and you're exactly right about what you're saying with him. It seems like he felt maybe a little bit box center limited at Oklahoma, but you go back and look at some Spencer Rattler highlight reel plays at Oklahoma, and some of them are plays that were busted or his first read wasn't there, and then he made something happen. And that is what South Carolina needs, because especially last season, they didn't have enough guys that could just go and make that play when things did break down. And when you play their schedule, things are going to break down, and they're going to break down a decent amount. You got to go make a play.
Yeah, I think, Chris, and the article was pointing out also, when they looked at the difference between his redshirt freshman year and his redshirt sophomore year, a big reason why, in their opinion, that the numbers did dip was because it was so structured. They were trying to cut down on mistakes, but in doing so, they took away the many big explosive plays that were a result of taking some chances. And I think those things always are going to go hand in hand. Coaches love to talk about explosive plays, but guess what? They also love to talk about protecting the football. Well, sometimes you have to take a little bit of risk to create those explosive plays, so there's always this give and this take between the two. The great quarterbacks and the great coaches, frankly, are the ones that can find where the kind of the perfect middle ground is, right? And you'll live with the mistakes if you're getting enough of the big plays off of that. I think, Chris, at the very least, we can all agree that the upside of this offense to go make some big plays and make some explosive plays, like that baseline is much higher going into this year than it was last year. Certainly, you throw in the injuries and the issue, at quarterback, that made it fall even more last year. The uncertainty at receiver, even dude, this time last year we were talking up Jaheim Bell, but we hadn't seen it with our own eyes yet either. So, there's a lot of elements on the offensive side that lead to us believing, and I think it's not even, you're not even on a limb to say that this is going to be an opportunity for a much more explosive offense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, quarterback, again, going back to what I said earlier about the receiver position, not that that's solved, not that that's a top 3 or 5 unit in the league, right? But I think just going in, I'll speak for me personally. I think you go in feeling like that can be a better and more productive top to bottom unit going into this season. You look at Bell, a healthy Marshawn Lloyd is a guy that can make some explosive plays. Juju McDowell. You also build into this that everybody's in year 2 of the system. Obviously, it was a big learning experience for players and coaches last season. And one of the kind of subplot storylines that you have to be looking at is that, how is the staff going to adjust to last season? What was kind of taken away and learned from that experience? And then how are you going to improve those processes going into this year to put your players in a better position to be successful? And then can the players go out and make those plays, obviously? But there was a lot that happened last year in year 1, whether it's injuries or being in a new system or just things that everybody needed to do better. If they can tweak those things and figure them out in year 2, that combined with maybe having a little bit more explosive, or you could argue a lot more explosive potential in offense, could make for a more consistent performance. And that's what this team needs to be, Wes. This isn't, even with all the stuff we're talking about, this isn't an offense that's going to be super explosive. I don't think we're going to get to the end of the 2022 season and everybody's talking about how explosive South Carolina was. Maybe if that happens, then that'll be a great thing for Gamecock fans, for the program. But this needs to be an offense that can be consistent. Let's just start by moving the chains, by scoring enough points to be able to, keep your defense off the field and keep yourself in some games, not let it get away so early. That's what this needs to be. And I think there are some signs that if things progress, they could get there.
Definitely, man. Either way, it'll be fun to watch and see how it plays out. Final thing before we get out of here, Chris. Like I said, we're not going to talk much baseball, if any, except for to acknowledge not the SEC start that team needed. I will say, even if you go down there, I talked to Colin today. He said Tennessee may be the best team in the country. The thing about SEC ball, though, is that you have such a difficult schedule week in, week out. Just avoiding a sweep can sometimes it keeps your head above water. Well, when you get swept, and then you have I think it's Vandy next. You're digging out of that hole for so long. It's hard to dig out of even one series in. I know this is dramatic, but it's hard to dig out of an 0-3 hole when you're playing such good teams. So you had some momentum after Texas. It feels like it just disappeared this weekend. Fans, I believe, are more focused on men's basketball right now, more focused on other things. But once the search is over, the disappointment for baseball, I believe, comes right back to the surface. And in my opinion, rightfully so. Y'all have reason to be frustrated, and it is certainly warranted. But as Brandon said, congrats to Dawn Staley and the South Carolina women's basketball team. They advanced to the Sweet 16. And Chris, it by all indications, it was not the prettiest of showings offensively, but this team's going to play defense, it appears, and we will see if that can carry them all the way to a championship, or if they can get something going offensively, because it has been they've they've controlled both games, but and obviously had a huge blowout in game one. But it's also been a bit of a grind, I would say.
Well, they have certainly turned up the defense and they've dialed back the offense meter just a little bit. But I think actually, Wes, that's an encouraging sign to play defense that well. This is a team that we know is capable of scoring points, sometimes a lot of points. They while outside shooting isn't, I would say, a strength of this team, they do have some girls that can shoot, and certainly their inside presence with Boston and Cardoso and Victoria Saxton. I mean, they have inside presence and they can score. But to hold, I mean, what was it? 18 points combined in the first two games. I don't know, something like that. 4 in game one, obviously, in the first half against Miami. They held Miami to a very low point total in the first half as well. And I think that's an encouraging sign. The offense can come. They do need to get that obviously fixed, and they need to play better offensively as this tournament goes on. But they are playing good ball. Like you said, they've controlled both games, and they'll play the winner of, who was it, UNC and Arizona. They'll get them on Friday night. So, yeah, great model of consistency in Dawn Staley's program, and they're certainly going to have a chance here.
No doubt. And as Brandon points out, the 2 seed on that side of the bracket knocked out. Goodbye, Iowa. I gotta say, there was a little part of me that just kind of enjoyed Iowa getting knocked out based on I wasn't a participant, but I saw the battles between the fams on Twitter and the Iowa basketball fans. And I know the NCAA wanted to set up the Caitlin Clark versus Aaliyah Boston battle, which would have been fun, but it was a little bit entertaining that Iowa went ahead and got knocked out. Can you confirm, Chris, Caitlin Clark, no relation to Chris Clark?
No relation. The only tie in there is that we considered naming one of our daughters Caitlin, and we did not.
Okay.
My wife was a high school basketball player, so odds are, if we had a daughter named Caitlin Clark, she probably would have also been good at basketball. But that's really the only relation there.
That's the only tie. So
just to clear that up.
Okay. Yep. All right, man. Well, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody joining us as always. Be on the lookout. Hopefully we'll have some type of men's basketball update soon. Football, spring practice coverage, of course, throughout the week and throughout the actually you got another 3 or 4 weeks of it as well. So be on the lookout for that on GamecockCentral.com. Thanks to our sponsors, my boy Clint Hammond, ClintHammond.com. And then, of course, the tax team here at Liberty Tax in the Columbia area. Again, 803-462-5576. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you all soon.